At a drunken party, her husband lost a night with me to his friend in a card game. Go, work off my debt, you hen, he growled, pushing me into the bedroom. But when his friend emerged 5 minutes later, pale as death, her husband realized he had made a fatal mistake. Good day to everyone, and I hope you're in great spirits. Before we continue, please make sure you've subscribed to the channel, liked the video, and left a comment. Enjoy listening. Olivia stood by the window, watching the first heavy drops of autumn rain shatter against the glass. The room smelled of ozone and freshly brewed coffee. Dinner awaited on the table, baked dorado with rosemary and a vegetable salad. Everything as Richard liked it. She always tried to make their home cozy, turning their 3-room mortgage apartment in a Boston suburb into a true family nest. When they met 8 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party, he had won her over with his charm, his knack for compliments, and a boyish confidence that the whole world lay at his feet. Richard, a manager at a prestigious car dealership, knew how to impress. And he still did. Only now, the object of that impression was less and less often her, his wife. The door clicked, and Richard entered the hallway. He threw his wet coat onto a chair, not even bothering to hang it in the closet, and walked into the kitchen. "Hi, honey." He kissed her on the cheek, and Olivia caught the faint scent of expensive whiskey. Exhausted, like a dog. Closed a big deal today. Had to celebrate with the client. "Hi." She smiled softly, trying not to show that she noticed his condition. "I made dinner, your favorite fish." "Fish sounds great." He peeked into the pot. "Though the guys and I already had a snack at the bar. But I'll make room for your fish." They sat at the table. Richard ate heartily, talking about his latest victory at work, his foolish boss, and envious colleagues. Olivia listened, nodded, and poured him tea. She had long since gotten used to their evenings revolving around his successes and his problems. Her work as a landscape designer seemed trivial to him, playing with flowers, as he sometimes joked, though her work brought almost half their household income and allowed them to pay the mortgage without difficulty. "By the way, Marcus and John are coming over on Saturday," Richard said casually, finishing the last piece of fish. "We'll hang out, play cards. So cook something tasty." Again Olivia blurted out before she could stop herself. "Richard, we were supposed to go see the autumn estate this weekend. You promised." "Oh, Olivia, what estate?" "Rain, mud. What haven't we seen? And the guys are coming, we'll relax, have fun. Don't be such a bore." He said it in his usual tone, lightly mocking, but the word stung Olivia sharply. Bore. She had been hearing this word more and more lately, when asking him not to leave socks around, reminding him about a doctor's appointment, or saying she was tired after work and didn't want a noisy company. Something inside her tightened unpleasantly. Olivia remembered their first year together. Richard had been different then. He brought her breakfast in bed, gave flowers for no reason, and listened for hours to her stories about new projects. They dreamed of children, a big house with a garden she would design herself. Where had all of that gone? When had he turned into this self-satisfied, slightly cynical man, for whom an evening with friends mattered more than a promise made to his wife? "All right," she said quietly, "I'll cook." "That's my girl," he said, patting her cheek like a little girl. "By the way, put on that blue dress of yours. John really likes it. Last time he said my wife just a picture, really." Olivia tried to smile, but it came out forced. She didn't like John, Richard's best friend, with his greasy jokes and evaluative gaze. And she absolutely did not want to wear a dress to please him. Of course, he even joked, for a wife like that, it's worth losing at cards. Richard laughed. Olivia froze, looking at her husband. He laughed genuinely, seeing nothing offensive in his words. For him, it was just a joke, a compliment to his trophy, and for her, it was another reminder that in his world she was a beautiful object, a point of pride to show off to friends. She said nothing, simply stood up, and silently began clearing the dishes from the table. A dull anxiety was building in her chest. It was the first, but very clear, warning bell that their family boat had sprung a serious leak and was slowly sinking. Saturday morning began with the smell of burnt cheesecakes. Olivia, sleep-deprived from working on a complex project, got distracted by a client call and didn't watch the frying pan. Richard, entering the kitchen, frowned. "Olivia, what's that smell? Couldn't you have had a proper breakfast on your day off?" "Sorry, I got distracted." She scooped the blackened cheesecakes into the trash. "I'll make an omelet now." "No need, I'll just have some coffee and go get beer for the evening." He opened the fridge. "You haven't forgotten the guys are coming today, right? Snacks ready?" "Not yet. I just woke up." Olivia felt irritation rising inside her. "I can't split myself, Richard. I have an important project due soon. I spent the whole night on sketches." "Oh, come on, sketches." He waved it off. "Found a problem?" "My mother raised 3 kids and worked in a factory. And she always had a 3-course lunch ready. And you can't handle just one project." This was his favorite comparison, the saintly mother who managed everything, and her, Olivia, the incapable wife. He seemed not to notice that his mother had lived in a different time, didn't pay a mortgage, and didn't work until midnight to please a demanding client. Olivia remained silent, deciding not to start a quarrel. She quietly made him coffee in the morning, watching him dress hurriedly. Before leaving, he tossed over his shoulder, "And don't forget to buy lots of chips and nuts. Marcus likes pistachios." The door closed behind him, leaving Olivia alone in the kitchen with the smell of burnt food and a bitter taste of resentment. She looked at her laptop, where a complex countryside plot design was open. The client, a wealthy businessman, constantly requested revisions, demanding perfection. This project could have been her breakthrough, her ticket into the world of major commissions and professional recognition. But Richard didn't understand. For him, her work was merely a backdrop for his own, far more important and significant life. In the evening, when her husband's friends had settled in the living room, the apartment was filled with loud laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of cigarette smoke. Olivia, as usual, played the role of hostess, bringing snacks, emptying ashtrays, smiling at jokes that seemed flat and vulgar to her. John, a slick, oily man with darting eyes, once again offered her ambiguous compliments. "Olivia, today you're like a rose in a flower bed," he said as she set a plate of hot sandwiches on the table. "And we're like dung beetles, drawn to your beauty." Richard laughed loudly, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "Good," he said. "My Olivia knows how to impress." Olivia forced a smile and hurried back to the kitchen. Only one person in this group didn't make her recoil: Marcus, Richard's childhood friend, a quiet and reserved IT specialist. He always kept to himself, avoided rude conversations, and looked at Olivia with a kind of sad sympathy. When she brought another batch of snacks, Marcus stepped forward. "Here, let me help." He took the heavy dish from her hands. "You shouldn't carry everything yourself." "Thank you." She looked at him gratefully. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't get used to it," he whispered, so that no one else could hear. "You look tired." "Project burning?" She waved vaguely. "It's fine, I'll manage. If you need any help, just say so," he added, returning to the table. This brief conversation warmed Olivia slightly. It felt good to realize that at least one person in this group saw her not just as a beautiful accessory to his friend, but as a living, breathing person. Later, when the poker game was in full swing and the room's air was thick with smoke and alcohol fumes, Olivia stepped out onto the balcony to breathe. She gazed at the city lights and thought about how drastically her life differed from the one she had dreamed of. She wanted quiet family evenings, walks together, heart-to-heart conversations, but instead, she got endless drunken parties where she felt like an outsider and utterly alone. "Why are you here by yourself?" Richard appeared on the balcony. He was already fairly drunk. His eyes gleamed with an unhealthy excitement. "Come join us. The fun's about to start. I'm on a roll tonight, planning to clean everyone out." "Richard, maybe that's enough for today?" She looked at him with concern. "You've already had a lot to drink, and you're playing for money. This won't end well. Don't tell me how to live." He roughly brushed her hand aside. "I know what I'm doing. Go get us more beer, we ran out." He returned to the room, leaving her alone with a heavy sense of foreboding. She knew his passion for cards, that gambling thrill that clouded his judgment. He had already lost considerable sums several times, forcing them into debt to pay off the losses. But tonight, seeing the fire in his eyes, Olivia realized that this game could cost them far more than just money. By midnight, the game reached its peak. Bets were rising, the atmosphere tense. Olivia went into the room several times, trying to persuade her husband to stop, but he only waved her away irritably. She watched the stack of chips in front of him shrink and his face grow darker. His main opponent was John, who played with calculating confidence, occasionally casting oily glances at Olivia. At one point, Marcus simply left the game, saying he wasn't interested, and sat in a chair with a book he found on the shelf. "Richard, that's enough," Olivia tried again when her husband asked her to fetch the last $1,000 from her wallet. "This is our emergency fund for unexpected expenses. Don't interfere." He barked without looking at her. "I need to win it back. My card's coming, I can feel it." With a heavy heart, she handed over the money, knowing it was futile. After 109 minutes, it was over. Richard had lost. He sat pale as a sheet, staring at the empty table before him. "Well, buddy, it happens." John swept the chips toward himself with a satisfied smirk. "3,000 from you." "3," croaked Richard. "We didn't agree on that much." "How didn't we agree?" John looked surprised. "You yourself suggested doubling the bet in the last round. Everyone heard that, right?" "Not good, Richard. You've got to keep your word." Olivia felt the ground slip beneath her feet. 3,000, that was almost her entire monthly salary. Money she had been saving for professional development courses. "I don't have that kind of money right now," Richard muttered. "I'll pay you back in a month." "No, buddy, that won't do," John shook his head. "Debts have to be paid immediately. I've got plans too. Or do you want me to tell the guys that Richard Griffin doesn't keep his word?" A heavy silence filled the room. Richard sat with his head down. Olivia saw his hands trembling. She felt sorry for him, yet her anger was growing. How could he be so irresponsible? "I'll think of something," Richard mumbled. Then his gaze fell on Olivia. Something flashed in his eyes that made her afraid. It was the look of a cornered animal, ready to do anything to save its own skin. "Olivia," he stood and approached her. "We need to talk alone." He led her to the kitchen and closed the door tightly. "You have to help me," he said, grabbing her shoulders. His fingers dug painfully into her skin. "You have to get that money. From where, Richard? She struggled to hold back tears. We don't have savings like that. You know it. You spent everything on your games. Take a loan. His voice was harsh, almost alien. Go to the bank tomorrow and arrange it. You have a good credit history. They'll give you a loan. I can't believe my ears. I won't do that just to cover your gambling debt. Will you? He shook her. You're my wife, and you're obligated to help me. It's your debt too. We're family. Families don't gamble away their last money. She shouted. Families think about the future, the mortgage, the kids we once wanted. Don't you dare lecture me. His face twisted with anger. I said, if I tell you to take a loan, you take a loan. Or else what? She freed herself from his grasp. You'll hit me? At that moment, Marcus peeked into the kitchen. Guys, are you okay? He looked at them anxiously. Maybe I should go? Everything's fine, Richard hissed, throwing a hostile look at his friend. Mind your own business. Go to John and tell him I'll sort it out now. Marcus hesitated, but then nodded and left. Olivia watched her husband, and the man she had once loved now seemed completely foreign to her. Cold, cruel, selfish. He was ready to saddle her with his shameful debt without a second thought about the consequences. I'm not taking a loan, Richard, she said firmly. This is your problem, and you'll have to deal with it yourself. Oh, really, he smirked, but there was no amusement in his eyes, only cold rage. So you refuse to help your own husband in a time of need? Well, we'll see how you sing when I tell everyone what kind of wife I have. He spun sharply and left the kitchen, leaving Olivia alone. She leaned against the wall, feeling her knees trembling. This wasn't just an incident, it was a moment that split their life into before and after. She realized that the marriage she had worked so hard to build was crumbling before her eyes, and the trigger was nothing more than an ordinary card game loss. The next day, Sunday, passed in oppressive silence. Richard didn't speak to Olivia, deliberately ignoring her presence. He locked himself in the living room with his laptop, occasionally making calls and hanging up irritably. Olivia tried to focus on her project, but her thoughts kept returning to the previous night. Her husband's words, "You're my wife, and you're obligated to help me," echoed in her mind. She had always believed that family meant partnership, mutual support. But in Richard's view, apparently, it meant something entirely different. In the evening, he finally emerged from his hideout. His face was tired and angry. Well, enough? He said, pouring himself a glass of water. Because of your stubbornness, I'm completely screwed. What does my stubbornness have to do with it? Olivia put down her pencil. You lost the money, not me. But you could have helped. You could have just gone and taken that damn loan. We could have paid it off together. Together? She laughed bitterly. How do we pay the mortgage together, half of which I cover? Or how did we save for vacation together, and then you decided to spend that money on a new phone for your sister? Richard frowned. He didn't like being reminded of his financial obligations to relatives, which he generously fulfilled from their joint budget. Don't change the subject, he continued. This is about me. John has already called 3 times. He's threatening to come to my work and cause a scene. Do you realize what this will do to my reputation? And do you realize what will happen to our family if we take another loan because of your foolishness? Her voice wavered. We have a mortgage, Richard. We're barely making ends meet. He stepped close to her. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Here's the deal. I'm giving you one last chance. Tomorrow morning you go to the bank. If they won't give you a loan, you find another way. Sell your stuff, ask your parents. I don't care. But by the end of the week, the money has to be with John. I'm not asking my parents, Olivia said firmly. They already help us enough. I'm not selling the ring my grandmother gave me. Then it's the loan, he cut her off. No discussion. Otherwise, you'll regret it badly. With that, he went to the bedroom and demonstratively lay on the very edge of the bed, turned toward the wall. Olivia remained in the kitchen, feeling tears streaming down her cheeks. It was an ultimatum. He wasn't asking, he was demanding, threatening. The person she had trusted, the one she had loved, had turned into a merciless stranger and tyrant. Olivia remembered how her father, a retired colonel, had told her in private when she first introduced Richard, "He loves himself too much, daughter." Men like that are difficult. They see in a woman only a reflection of their own success. At the time, she had dismissed his words as fatherly jealousy. How right he had been. Richard truly loved only himself, and she was merely a convenient tool to maintain his comfortable life. That night she hardly slept, tossing and turning, listening to his even breathing, thinking about what to do next: submit, take the loan, and swallow the humiliation again, or insist on her stance and see what he was capable of in anger. Inside her, fear and pride battled, fear of losing her family, whatever it was, and fear of losing herself entirely, becoming a powerless shadow of her husband. In the morning, she went to the bank. Not because she had given in, but to prove to him, and herself, that there was no easy way out. She filled out the application, spoke with the credit manager, and, as expected, was rejected within an hour. Their mortgage burden was too high for another personal loan. They refused me, she told Richard on the phone. Find another way, he growled into the receiver. I told you, I don't care how you do it. There are no other options, she replied calmly. My parents aren't millionaires, and I'm not selling Grandma's ring. It's a keepsake. A keepsake? He laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Who needs your keepsake when my reputation and possibly my job are at stake? If you don't find the money, you can pack your things and go live with your parents. He hung up. Olivia stood in the middle of the street, phone in hand, feeling the world around her shatter into tiny pieces. He was ready to kick her out of their home, the home she had helped pay half the mortgage for, the home she had made cozy, the home where she dreamed of raising their future children. And all because of a card game debt. It was a point of no return. In that moment, she realized she was no longer afraid. Anger and cold determination pushed out the fear. She would not be a victim. She would fight for herself. Returning home, Olivia found Richard already there. He was sitting in the kitchen with his head in his hands. Seeing her, he jumped up. Well, did you find anything? No, she placed her bag calmly on a chair. I told you, there are no options. So, you did nothing? He began to get worked up again. Just walked around and came back? I went to the bank. They refused me. I'm not going to humiliate myself and ask friends or parents for money. This is your debt, Richard, and you need to deal with it. I will deal with it. He slammed his fist on the table. I'll fix it. I'll win it back. What? Olivia couldn't believe her ears. You're going to play again? Yes. His eyes glittered feverishly. I called Marcus. He agreed to give me a chance. We'll play 1-on-1 tonight. I'll get every penny back. Are you insane? She whispered. You'll only dig yourself deeper. It's my only chance, he said, grabbing her hands. You have to support me. Just stay close and don't interfere. I'm not participating. She pulled her hands away. I don't want to watch you destroy yourself again. At that moment, Olivia remembered her project. Today was the final deadline for the sketches, the important client her career depended on. She had completely forgotten about it because of this family drama. I need to work, she said, heading to her desk in the corner of the living room. What work? He blocked her path. We're deciding our fate here, and you're worrying about your little flowers. Those flowers bring half the money into this house. She couldn't hold back. If I don't submit the project on time, we'll lose a major client and a huge sum of money. I don't care. He shoved her aside. Tonight, you'll stay here and wait while I fix our problems. Deal with your pictures later. He went to the bedroom, apparently to mentally prepare for the decisive battle. Olivia sat at the computer but couldn't focus. Her hands trembled, her thoughts tangled. Pressure came from all sides, a demanding client, a looming deadline, and a husband who had completely lost touch with reality. She felt trapped, caught in a snare with no escape. In the evening, Marcus arrived. He looked uneasy and tried not to meet Olivia's eyes. "Hi," he said softly. I tried to talk him out of it. I know, she gave a faint smile. Thank you for at least trying. Did he hurt you? He lowered his voice as Richard came out of the bedroom. Not yet, she replied quietly. Richard approached them, rubbing his hands in anticipation. Well, buddy, ready to part with your money? Luck's on my side tonight. We'll see, Marcus replied calmly, laying out a deck of cards on the table. They began to play. Olivia went to the kitchen to avoid witnessing the madness. She tried to work, but the lines in the client's email blurred before her eyes. Olivia, if the sketches are not in my inbox by 10 p.m., consider our contract terminated. Only 2 hours remained. She heard their voices from the living room, Marcus's occasional remarks and Richard's increasingly loud, excited shouts. Apparently, he was really lucky. Olivia! He shouted an hour later. Bring the champagne, we need to celebrate my triumph. With a heavy heart, she took the bottle they had saved for a special occasion from the fridge. Entering the living room, she saw the mountain of chips in front of Richard. He was beaming. See? He hugged her around the waist. And you didn't believe me. I almost got John's money back. A couple more rounds, and I'll be in the clear. Marcus sat across from him, his face unreadable. He moved the chips calmly, showing no emotion. Maybe that's enough for today? He suggested. You've already won back your losses, Richard. No need to tempt fate. Afraid? Richard laughed. Feeling like you're going to lose? No, my friend, we play to the end. The bank. As you say, Marcus shrugged. Olivia returned to the kitchen. Her heart was pounding with a sense of dread. She glanced at the clock, 9:30. Half an hour left to submit the project. She opened her laptop and forced herself to focus. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. She made the final edits, checked the dimensions, added descriptions. At 10 o'clock, she pressed send and leaned back in her chair with relief. Done. At least with work, she had succeeded. And at that moment, a sound came from the living room that made her blood run cold, the crash of a fallen chair and Richard's furious, desperate roar. She realized he had lost again. Olivia ran into the living room. The scene she saw was worse than any nightmare. Richard stood in the middle of the room, his face twisted in a grimace of rage and despair. The overturned chair lay on the floor, and cards were scattered across the table. Marcus sat in his seat, calmly watching his friend. On his side of the table, a pile of chips towered. How? Richard gasped. How is this possible? I had a full house. And I had 4 of a kind, Marcus replied quietly. You lost, Richard. No. Richard shouted. You cheated. You couldn't have one. I don't cheat, you know that. Marcus stood slowly. You went all in yourself. You took the risk and lost. Accept it like a man. A man? Richard laughed hysterically. What kind of man am I now, for God's sake? How much do I owe you? Along with John's debt, which I paid for you so he wouldn't interfere with your work, it's 15,000, Marcus counted calmly. Richard grabbed his head. He sank slowly onto the couch, staring at a single point. 15,000, it was a total, absolute disaster. Olivia stood in the doorway, unable to move. She felt sorry for him, but that pity mingled with contempt and anger. Marcus approached Olivia. I'm sorry it came to this, he said quietly. I'm leaving. I'll talk to Richard tomorrow, when he sobers up. He headed for the door, but Richard suddenly jumped up. Stop! He shouted. Don't leave! We're not finished yet. What are you talking about? Marcus turned. You don't have any money left, Richard. The game is over. Money? Richard drawled, his gaze returning to Olivia. It was the same predatory, appraising look as before. But now there was something even more terrifying in it. Madness. I don't have money, he said slowly, moving toward his wife. That's true, Olivia replied, but I have something else. I have a wife. Olivia recoiled, but he grabbed her hand. You're my friend, Marcus. He smirked crookedly at Marcus. You always said I had a beautiful wife. Richard, stop. Marcus' face turned to stone. No, listen, Richard persisted. I know how much you like her. I'm not blind. So here's my offer, a night with Olivia in exchange for my debt. The room fell into a deafening, ringing silence. Olivia stared at her husband, unable to believe her ears. He couldn't have said that. It just couldn't be. It was some horrible, absurd nightmare. Marcus stood pale as death. His fists clenched until the knuckles whitened. Do you understand what you just said? He whispered. So what? Richard, drunk and oblivious to danger, shrugged. She's my wife. I do what I want. She's your wife now. Which means you'll sleep with my friends if I say so. He turned to Olivia. His eyes blazed with insane fire. Go, he growled. Go to the bedroom. Pay off my debt, bitch. He shoved her toward the bedroom. Olivia stumbled but stayed on her feet. She looked at him, and in that moment, all love, all pity, all remaining warm feelings for this man died. In their place remained only icy emptiness and a burning, all-consuming shame. She slowly walked into the bedroom, not because she obeyed, but because her body moved on autopilot. She heard Marcus say a single word behind her, quiet, but full of such threat that a chill ran down her spine. Don't. Olivia entered the bedroom and closed the door behind her. She leaned against it, feeling her legs buckle. The room, which she had decorated with such care, choosing every pillow, every curtain, now felt alien and hostile. The walls seemed to press in, and the air was thick, heavy, impossible to breathe. She slowly slid down to the floor along the door, hugging her knees. Her body trembled, but there were no tears. Inside, there was a scorched desert. Bitch, the word, a brand, a verdict. He had called her a bitch. He, her husband, the man to whom she had sworn love and loyalty, had not just humiliated her, he had trampled and pulverized everything between them, all the memories, all the hopes, all their shared past and their unfulfilled future. He had appraised her at $15,000. The price of a used car, the price of her honor, her dignity, her soul. She sat on the cold floor, staring into the darkness. Fragments of memories flashed through her mind. There they were, young and carefree, walking along the waterfront, and he gave her a bouquet of wild daisies. There he was meeting her after her thesis defense with a giant teddy bear. There he was proposing, on one knee, his eyes shining with genuine tenderness. Where had that guy gone? At what point had he become this monster? Maybe he had always been like this, and she simply didn't want to notice. She remembered his jokes, his disregard for her work, and his selfishness, which she had taken for masculine confidence. She had built their family on illusions, on a fabricated image. And now that house of cards had collapsed, burying her under its debris. She didn't know how much time had passed. A minute, an hour, eternity. Outside the door, it was quiet. Too quiet. This silence was more terrifying than the screams. What was happening out there? What would Marcus do? And what if he agreed? The thought sent an icy terror through her body. Marcus had always been honorable. But what if drunken excitement, the humiliation of losing, and years of hidden affection for her drove him to act? She pressed herself against the door, bracing for the worst. The doorknob slowly turned. Olivia closed her eyes, curling up into a ball. The door opened quietly, and Marcus appeared in the doorway. He didn't step inside, remaining in the doorframe. Olivia tensed even more, expecting him to advance, but he didn't move. She slowly opened her eyes. He was looking at her, and in his gaze was an infinite pain and compassion, so profound that Olivia understood he would not harm her. He was not like Richard. He was not a predator. He was the only person in this cursed apartment who still saw her as a human being, not a thing. Olivia, his voice was quiet and hoarse. He will never dare touch you again. She remained silent, unable to speak. The tears she had held back for so long finally poured down her cheeks. These were not tears of resentment or fear, they were tears of relief. She was not alone in this nightmare. Marcus silently watched Olivia cry, not daring to come closer for fear of frightening her further. He simply stood in the doorway. His presence was quiet, but solid, like a rock. When the first wave of sobs passed and only quiet sniffles remained, he finally spoke. "He's not worth your tears, Olivia. Not one of them." "I don't understand how this could happen," she whispered, wiping her face with her sleeve. We loved each other." "He never loved you," Marcus said quietly but firmly. "He loved himself when he was with you. He liked having a beautiful, smart, convenient wife. It stroked his ego. But the moment his comfort was threatened, he showed his true face. His words were harsh, but truthful. Deep down, Olivia knew it, but she had been afraid to admit it to herself. "And Richard?" "What about Richard?" she asked, fearing the answer. "He's fine." Physically, Marcus gave a crooked smile. "Lying on the couch, coming to. Don't worry, I didn't kill him, though I really wanted to." He paused, then added, "Olivia, I've known him since childhood. We grew up in the same neighborhood. He's always been selfish, reckless, willing to step on others for his own gain. I thought marriage to you would change him. I thought you could make him better," Olivia murmured. "I was wrong. People like him don't change." He stepped into the room and crouched in front of her, still keeping his distance. I need to tell you something. He looked her straight in the eyes, and in his gaze there wasn't a trace of the sleaziness that John had, only endless tenderness and sorrow. I've loved you for a long time. Ever since the day Richard first introduced us. I saw how bright, kind, and genuine you are. And I saw how he didn't appreciate you. I stayed silent all these years because you were his wife and he was my friend. But today, he crossed every line. He's no longer my friend. Olivia listened, and in her soul, empty and scorched, something new began to take root. It wasn't a reciprocal feeling. No, it was an awareness of her own worth. If this man, whom she barely knew, could see all that in her, then she really had value. That meant the problem wasn't her, it was Richard. I'm not going to take advantage of the situation, Marcus continued. I just want you to know, you're not alone. I'll help you however I can. Do you want me to call a taxi so you can go to your parents? Do you want me to help you pack your things? Or do you want me to just sit here by the door until you decide what to do next? His words, his calm support, worked on her better than any sedative. The icy armor that had gripped her soul began to melt. In place of despair and humiliation came a cold, ringing fury. The fury was not aimed at Richard. He was too pathetic for that. The fury was aimed at herself, for letting herself be treated like this, for turning a blind eye to his antics for years, for excusing him, for believing his lies. Enough. She slowly rose. Her legs still trembled, but steel appeared in her gaze. Help me pack, she said firmly. Marcus nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. Are you sure? Maybe we should wait until morning? No, I won't stay in this house a minute longer. This house is soaked with his lies and betrayal. I'm leaving now. She went to the wardrobe and pulled out a large suitcase. At that moment, she wasn't thinking about where she would go or what she would do tomorrow. She only knew one thing, her old life was over, and she was the one putting the period at the end. This was her turning point, the moment when a victim becomes someone who decides her own fate. When Marcus stepped out of the bedroom, Richard was already sitting on the couch, holding a bag of ice from the freezer to his head. Seeing his friend, he tried to put on a smug grin. So, paid off your debt? Quick, huh? Hope my little hen was to your liking. Marcus didn't answer. He silently approached Richard. His movements were slow, almost lazy, but there was a coiled tension in them. Richard, not expecting an attack, kept grinning. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. Male solidarity, all that. Maybe another beer? The only answer he got was a single, precise, professionally delivered punch. Marcus had trained in boxing in his youth, and his hand still remembered how to strike. The punch landed squarely on the jaw. Richard's head snapped back. He let out a short wheeze and collapsed onto the couch, losing consciousness. The bag of ice slid to the floor. Marcus stared at the sprawled body for a few seconds, then wiped his hand on his jeans with disgust. He felt neither satisfaction nor anger, only emptiness and revulsion. He turned and headed back to the bedroom. Olivia had already opened the wardrobe and was methodically packing her things into the suitcase. She moved like a machine, not thinking, just grabbing whatever was within reach, dresses, jeans, underwear. He won't bother us, Marcus said quietly as he entered the room. He's on a little time out. Olivia nodded without turning. Good. Need help? He came closer. Yes, please. Grab that box. My documents and laptop are in there. They packed in silence. Marcus moved quickly and efficiently, taking clothes off hangers, folding them, placing them in the suitcase. Olivia packed cosmetics, books, and cherished personal items. She didn't take anything purchased by Richard or with joint funds, only what belonged to her before the marriage or what she bought with her own salary. When the suitcase was full, she surveyed the room. It seemed unchanged, but in reality, everything had changed. This room was no longer her home. "Where will you go?" Marcus asked. "To my parents." She gave the address in the suburbs. "I'll drive you." "No need. I'll call a taxi." "I said I'll drive you." There was not a hint of argument in his voice. "I'm not leaving you alone now." Olivia didn't argue. She felt so drained that she simply didn't have the strength to object. She needed help, and she was grateful that this particular person was there. When they stepped into the living room, Richard was already beginning to recover. He sat on the couch, holding his head, groaning. Seeing Olivia with her suitcase and Marcus, he tried to stand. Where are you going?" His speech was slurred. "I'm leaving, Richard," Olivia replied calmly. "Leaving? How can you leave?" "You can't leave. You're my wife." "Not anymore." She shook her head. "Today, you ended our marriage yourself, with your words, with your actions." But it was just a joke. He tried to smile, but pain contorted his face. "I was drunk. I didn't know what I was saying." "You knew perfectly well," she cut him off. "You just showed who you really are. Goodbye." She turned to leave, but he jumped up and blocked her path. "I won't let you. You're not going anywhere. This is my house." Marcus stepped between them. "Step aside, Richard." "And you don't get involved, traitor," Richard shrieked. "I thought you were my friend, and you're sleeping with my wife behind my back." "I haven't touched her," Marcus said through clenched teeth. "Unlike you, I respect her. Now step away from the door, or this won't be the last hit." Richard looked at Marcus's clenched fists, at his cold, contempt-filled eyes, and something inside him broke. He stepped back, breathing heavily. "You'll regret this, Olivia," he hissed over his shoulder. "You'll crawl back, and you'll see who really needs you, besides me." Olivia didn't turn around. She simply walked through the door that Marcus held open for her. He carried her suitcase, and they descended the stairs in silence. Outside, a fine, unpleasant rain fell. Marcus opened the door of his car for her, helped her in, and placed the suitcase in the trunk. "Thank you," she said softly as they pulled away. "No problem." He drove, focused on the road. "I should have done this much sooner." They drove through the night city. The streetlights blurred on the wet asphalt. Olivia stared out the window, feeling nothing but overwhelming exhaustion. Her old life had been left behind in that apartment, where the man she had once loved now sat on the couch, and ahead lay the unknown. They arrived at her parents' house well past midnight. All the while, Olivia had remained silent, watching the lights blur past. Marcus also didn't break the silence, understanding that any words now would be unnecessary. He simply drove confidently and calmly, and his silent presence was more comforting than any conversation could have been. Lights burned in the windows of her parents' house. Olivia knew they were awake, waiting for her. She had called them as soon as she left the city and said only 3 words, "Mom, I'm coming." That was enough. Her father, Gregory, a former soldier, met them at the door. He looked silently at his tear-streaked daughter and at Marcus, who was taking the suitcase out of the trunk, and understood everything without a word. "Come in, daughter." He hugged her by the shoulders. Her mother brewed tea. Gregory shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Thank you, son. Truly." Marcus looked away. I'll leave you to it. If you need anything, call any time. Come in for tea at least, Cheryl, who had rushed to the hallway, offered. No, thank you. I have to go. He nodded to Olivia, take care. And he left, dissolving into the night darkness. The kitchen smelled of mint and her mother's pies. Cheryl was bustling at the stove, trying to hide her worry behind her chores. Olivia sat down at the table and only then felt the tension of the past few hours begin to release. She was home, safe. What happened, Olivia? Her mother asked, placing a cup of fragrant tea in front of her. Olivia took a sip, and along with the warmth, bitterness spread through her body. She told everything, about the card debt, the ultimatum, the last game, and those terrible words Richard had spoken. She spoke, and tears ran down her cheeks on their own. Her mother listened silently, stroking her hand, while her father sat across from her, his face growing increasingly stern. When Olivia finished, he stood up. I'll kill him, he said quietly, but loud enough to make Olivia's heart stop. Dad, don't, she said fearfully. You don't have to do anything. It's already over. No, daughter, it's not over, her father clenched his fists. No one has the right to humiliate my child like that. No one. Gregory, calm down, her mother intervened. Not now. Olivia needs to rest, and we'll deal with that scoundrel later. The next day, Richard started calling. At first, his calls were demanding and angry. He shouted into the phone that she had no right to leave, that she had destroyed their family. Olivia listened silently, her jaw tight. Then his tone changed. He began to plead, begging her to return, promising that everything would be different. I overreacted, Olivia, forgive me, he said. I was drunk, I didn't know what I was doing. Let's start over. I'll quit gambling, I swear. But Olivia no longer believed him. She knew it was only temporary remorse, born of fear of loneliness and inconvenience. Once she returned, everything would start over again. 3 days later, he arrived, standing at the gates of their house with a bouquet of withered roses, pitiful and worn. Her father came out to meet him. What do you want? He asked coldly. I came for Olivia. Richard tried to look confident, but his voice trembled. She doesn't want to talk to you, her father said firmly. Leave. I won't leave until I see her. Richard tried to step forward, but her father blocked his way. I told you to leave, Gregory repeated, and his voice carried that unmistakable commanding steel. Or do you want me to help you? Richard looked at his father-in-law, a short but solidly built man with a heavy gaze, and realized arguing was useless. He threw the bouquet to the ground and trudged to his car. The divorce was quick and, surprisingly, quiet. Richard didn't contest anything regarding the division of property or the apartment. The conversation with his father-in-law had clearly left an indelible impression on him. He simply signed all the papers and disappeared from her life. John, to whom Richard had never repaid the debt, called Olivia a few times, but she had changed her number. Her ex-husband's problems no longer concerned her. Marcus called once a week, just to check how she was doing. He didn't intrude, didn't talk about his feelings, he just stayed nearby, at a distance. This silent support helped Olivia more than any words ever could. She knew she had a friend she could rely on. A year passed. Autumn had once again painted the trees in crimson and gold. But for Olivia, it was a completely different autumn. She no longer lived with her parents. A few months after the divorce, she rented a small but cozy apartment in the city center, close to her new job. The controversial project she had completed the evening she left Richard turned out to be surprisingly successful. The client was delighted and recommended her to his partners. Orders came pouring in one after another. Olivia opened her own small landscape design studio and, for the first time in her life, felt truly independent and confident in her abilities. She changed not only internally but also externally. She cut her hair and adopted a bolder, brighter style of clothing. The hidden anxiety disappeared from her eyes, replaced by a calm smile that often played on her lips. She worked a lot, met with friends, and went to the theater. She lived fully, with her whole heart. Marcus was still nearby. Their friendship had grown even stronger. He helped with the move, fixed her computer, and on weekends they strolled through the park or went to the cinema. He never brought up his confession or tried to turn their relationship into something more. He just stayed by her side, and Olivia valued that more than anything in the world. She knew that, perhaps someday, she would be ready for a new relationship, and the first person she would give a chance to would be him. But for now, she was content being on her own. One day, while sitting in a cafe discussing a new project with Marcus, she saw Richard at a neighboring table. He wasn't alone, but with a flashy, vulgarly dressed girl. He laughed loudly, telling her something, looking just as self-assured as he had before. Their eyes met. For a moment, his smile faded, and something resembling regret flickered in his eyes, but it vanished immediately. He nodded at her as if to an old acquaintance and turned back to his companion. Olivia expected to feel pain or resentment, but inside she felt nothing. This person had become completely foreign to her. The past had finally let her go. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, noticing her gaze. "Yes," she said, smiling genuinely and brightly. "More than okay." She took a sip of her favorite tea and looked out the window. Outside, the big city buzzed with life. She was living her own life, full of ups and downs, disappointments and hopes. Olivia knew that now she was ready for any challenge. She had endured humiliation and betrayal, but she hadn't broken. She emerged from that story changed, strong, wise, and, most importantly, free. Free to choose whom to be with, how to live, and whom to love. And that freedom was worth all the suffering she had endured.